Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that, and thank you for yielding, and thank you for taking the charge on this evening to share this message. First, do no harm. Do no harm. These are three short words, but to physicians, they represent a sacred charge. Three short words that now hang in the balance here in the District of Columbia after the D.C. Council passed the Death with Dignity Act, legalizing physician-assisted suicide in the nation's capital. In authorizing doctors to violate the Hippocratic Oath of do no harm, physician-assisted suicide undermines a key safeguard that protects our nation's most vulnerable citizens, the disabled, the sick, the poor. A key safeguard that helps to ensure our loved ones receive the best medical care when they need it the most. Instead of simply providing end-of-life comfort and a potential for cure, D.C.'s new law is poised to do more harm than good. This act leaves patients unprotected, doctors unaccountable, and our most vulnerable citizens at risk of having fewer medical options at their disposal rather than having more. It's too broad. This act allows adults diagnosed with a terminal disease, having less than 6 months to live, to receive a prescription for medication to end their life on their own, alone. There are concerns that the definition of terminal disease is too broad, since most doctors will admit accurately predicting life expectancy is almost impossible. And it is. There's many conditions, such as diabetes or HIV. They're considered incurable or irreversible, and they're terminal if left untreated. There are many diseases that are terminal if left untreated, but curable if treated. So this bill fails to adequately protect patients from coercion or abuse. And despite the fact that depression is commonly associated with a patient seeking assisted suicide, D.C.'s legislation does not make screening for mental illness mandatory. It also has no safeguard against pressure that family members or heirs might exert on a patient to choose suicide. It leaves doctors unaccountable. Compliance with the bill's limited safeguards is difficult to track because the bill directs doctors not to place the actual cause and manner of death on the death certificate. It doesn't say suicide. The report requirements in the bill are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. And perhaps most concerning of all, once the prescription for lethal medication is filled, oversight is non-existent. There's no requirement to ensure that the prescription was used as intended. This could limit care. Under the new law, patients may end up with fewer options, not more options. D.C. residents who are not able to pay for health care out of pocket may find their options limited when facing a new diagnosis, suffering from a chronic illness, facing a disability, or struggling with mental illness. For certain medical conditions, assisted suicide could become the cheapest option. Ultimately, whatever its intentions, D.C.'s new law puts patients at risk and could limit their access to high-quality health care. It could limit their access to cures. It prioritizes cost over compassion, cost over care. We've weighed this legislation. We've looked at it seriously, and we find it very wanting. And D.C. residents deserve better. 22 years ago, my sister was diagnosed with an incurable cancer, and she had very little time to live. She was at one point given the option of a bone marrow transplant, and her insurance company said, "It's experimental, we don't cover it." We had to fight that, and we were going to do it anyway. It's 22 years later. She survived. She's doing well. She's married and has 2 children. But somebody was telling her it's not worth it. This affects people with disabilities. This affects the poor. This attitude reminds me of a comment from the movie It's a Wonderful Life, where Mr. Potter says to George Bailey, "George, you're worth more dead than alive." That's not who we are, folks. In this bill, there's no verification or validation that the prescription was taken as intended for the person intended, or even taken at all. There's no witness necessary, no provider to address any complications that may occur when taking the medications. No assurance that it's not misused or used on someone else. No actual cause of death is reported. In this, they say, actions taken in accordance with this act do not constitute suicide, assisted suicide, mercy killing, or homicide. Oh, really? Maybe they should look up the definition of those words. Definition of homicide: the killing of one person by another, whether intended or not. The definition of suicide: act of taking one's own life voluntarily and intentionally. This bill is bad for the people of D.C. This is bad for America. This is not who we are. This is not who we are as a compassionate, caring group of Americans, especially caregivers, especially doctors. We can do better, and we all need to stand up against this. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.